an invisible force that defines, directs, and drives the nature, cosmos, and everything in it. No, it's not God, it's mathematics, and the very building blocks of it, the numbers. Right from the tally marks of the early men up until the current day usage of numbers, they have come a long way, and this is the history of the Hindu number system, which is globally used. Let's get started. The big picture of the Hindu numerals and every speck of detail that you're going to see henceforth in this documentary is fully based on facts, and the easiest way to verify them is to research for yourself and find the truth. Last couple of thousands of years, while the civilizations across the world were busy developing their own number systems and arithmetic operations, in Bhaarat or India, there were great minds which excelled in the fields of Jyotishya, astronomy using numbers, and then Shastra for combinatorics, and developed philosophies using the concepts of numbers called Samkhya Yoga. So long story short, the scientific achievements of India, just in the frame of reference of the numbers, has contributed greatly to the development of the world around. And much of the stories were never talked about. And this is our attempt to bring forward all those great stories with respect to numbers and mathematics, the achievements of ancient India. So let's cut this entire documentary into 3 chapters. The first chapter is the history of counting around the world. So basically how the counting started and how it evolved across the world. So that's chapter 1. Up next is chapter 2, the history of the evolution of numbers in Bhaarat. So the Hindu numeral system which is being used across the world, how it actually got developed in Bhaarat. What are the roots of it? That's chapter 2. Up next is chapter 3, how globally the adoption of the Hindu numeral system took place. Why, when, and how. So these are the questions that we're going to see in this documentary in these 3 chapters. So let's roll in. So that's the first chapter, the history of counting around the world. So first things first, when did this concept of counting originate? Well, the simple answer is it's since the beginning of time. A lion, for instance, knows how to count its cubs, or a swan knows how to count its babies. And even the early men, while hunting, would have definitely counted or shared or proportionated the kill amongst themselves. So basically this concept of counting is deeply ingrained into each and every corner of this nature. It is just our ability to understand it empirically has evolved over time. And the anecdote of mathematics was never invented, it is always discovered, appears to be true. Anyways, coming back to the concept of counting. One of the world's oldest artifact which shows the tally marks is called as Ishango bone. It's actually an animal bone which has tally marks to keep a track of something. It's almost like 18,000 years ago. This is one of the earliest known mathematical records that shows the concept of counting many thousands of years ago. While these tally marks from the early man were one of the oldest known mathematical artifacts, moving on to more a structured approach, the number system, the concept of counting, how it got conceptualized across the world in different civilizations. Let's try and understand that, starting with Africa, one of the very important cradles of civilization. So as very well known, Egyptian civilization, one of the oldest civilizations of Africa as well as the world. So this is how they used to count. I'm not going to go into the technicalities of which base it is and all, because my main objective is to make this documentary in a very simple language for everybody to understand. So I'll rather skip all the technical stuff and stick only to the facts. So this is how they used to keep track of the numbers. 1 to 9, it's kind of in tally marks. And from 10 and then 100, 1000, 10,000 and 1 million. This is how they used to have symbols for each of the number, and using these as the building blocks, they used to write the numbers in a sequential manner. We need to add just like you are doing today for the Roman numerals, for instance. Now moving on to another continent, the Americas. One of the oldest known civilizations in this part of the world is the Mayan civilization in around 1500 BCE. And they used to keep track of the numbers using these kind of symbols what you're seeing on the screen. And one very important observation here is Mayan civilization was one of the earliest civilizations also to think of the concept of zero. Yes, that's true. Mayan civilization was also one of the early civilizations which in kind of used or conceptualized zero as a placeholder. But it is not as perfect or even closer to what the Hindu numeral system is. The fact is, it was thought of back then by them. And if you see the pattern here as well, they are, instead of tally marks, they are kind of dots and then a tally mark right from 5, 6 onwards. It's again an arithmetic operation that you need to do holistically for those set of symbols to calculate the specific value of a number. Coming to Europe, one of the oldest civilizations is the Minoan civilization. Not many people are aware of it. People generally think it's the Greek, but it's not. Rather, it is the Minoan civilization that predates the Greeks by a couple of thousands of years. So Minoan civilization also had a similar pattern of assigning certain symbols to the numbers and performing the arithmetic operations within that number to achieve the value or the absolute value of that specific number. And this number system of the Minoan civilization formed the bedrock foundation eventually for the Greeks to develop their numerical system, and on top of the Greeks came the Romans who developed their numerical system. So all these are very tightly interconnected in Europe. And then coming to Asia, excluding India, because we're going to talk about India a lot more eventually in this documentary. So the Asia excluding India part, here if you see Sumerian civilization and the Babylonians, so they're more or less like very close back in the history. So their number system is something like what you're seeing on the screen. They have 60 symbols, which is inherently built with only 2 symbols actually, 1 and 10. So if you pause it and closely observe, it's just one symbol for 1 and eventually one you have for 10, and using these 2 symbols the whole construct is built. So this is another number system back in the ancient world. Lastly, moving down to Australia. So here the aboriginals or the natives of Australia, many centuries ago, they used to communicate or count the numbers using different hand gestures. Most likely it's possible they could have also used some sort of tally marks for counting or keeping track of the numbers or things. So that's a very quick tour around the world in the ancient civilizations, how different civilizations used to keep track of the numbers. Now that is only to give a quick feeler around how counting evolved or how counting was done across different civilizations in the world. Now we are going to see exactly how this entire pattern of counting evolved in a very simple manner. So don't worry about all the symbols that you have seen or different number systems. You don't need to understand any of that. All you just need to know is there are different kinds of number systems around the world that got evolved independently and in different periods of time. And that's about it. So as in this chapter, the first one, we are discussing about how the counting originated in different parts of the world in different civilizations. Now let's try to break this entire process into a very simple format. But before that, we need to understand certain semantics, a very simple one just for a quick refresher. The first one is numbers. So numbers is a logical group of certain tangible things. Say for instance, 10 balls. It could be anything, like it's just a number, it's a logical, it's an idea basically. Number is an idea in simple words. And to put that idea on paper, you need a script, and that is called as a numeral. Now let's say I want to buy 10 balls. The number 10 is an idea, it's in my brain. Now I have to put it on paper saying that I want X number of balls. Here X is 10. So I can write this X in different scripts or different formats. As you can see some of the samples here. So I can write 10 in different formats, be it in Roman numeral system or in a conventional 10 as in it's given here, or even in binary numerals or in Hindi numerals or Sanskrit numerals, so on and so forth. So that is numerals. And the third word that we need to understand clearly is arithmetics. So the arithmetics is an operation between two numerals, either a fusion or a fission, like addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. These are the arithmetic operations. Now, these 3 words, we just need to, of course, it sounds like a math class, but these 3 words you need to understand clearly to understand the documentary as we proceed. And give it a simple thought. What is above numbers? Well, that's you, me, and everything in this universe. Now, if we talk about that dimension, it will going to take us into a different world altogether. So let's leave it at there. So let's limit ourselves to understand how the concept of numbers got transpired into articulating with form of numerals and how we eventually performed arithmetics on that. So this is the story that we're going to talk about. So it's going to get a bit longer, but do not lose out. We are trying to understand how the entire concept of counting evolved across civilizations. And to understand that, we need to go through this very small problem. Say for instance, you are in a room, an empty room, all alone by yourself. And we just have one pencil in that room. And you have to measure your height with that pencil. Now you don't know what is the length of that pencil. So all you can do is use that pencil as a yardstick and measure your height. And here in this case, say for instance, I'm 5 pencils height. Now this pencil has become a unit or a kind of a standard unit of measurement for me in that room, in that context, because I don't have access to anything else to measure my height in a more standard way. So this pencil is going to be my scale. Now let's extend ourselves into another problem. Now I have a heap of balls to count. I don't know how many balls are there. Now if I have to count one by one, and say for instance I arrived at the value of 100. So there are actually 100 balls, so 100 times I picked up one at a time. Okay, now if I start picking up two at a time, then I have to repeat the whole exercise of picking 2 balls at a time for 50 times. And if I take 5 balls at a time, then I have to repeat for 20 times. If I take 10 balls at a time, I have to repeat it for 10 times, right? Now for a moment, imagine that we don't have any kind of a language or a number system evolved yet. So we don't know basically what a number system is, and we're trying to invent one. So now if I want to keep a track of how many balls that I've counted, I'm going to invent a notation, a completely new one which never existed. Okay. So every 2 balls put together, I'm going to represent it with a star, and every 5 balls, a group of 5 balls, I'm going to represent it with a moon, and a group of 10 with a sun. Now every time I say for instance I want to write 10 balls, all I have to draw is the symbol of a sun, and it's a inherent notation for me that okay, a sun represents a group of 10 balls. Same way, a moon represents a group of 5 balls. Now if I want to represent 7 balls, then I will draw a moon with a star beside it. So I form a notation of my own saying that a moon and a star put together, 5 plus 2 is equal to 7. A star and a moon together represents number 7. So using these 3 symbols, I kind of write as many numbers as possible within that limit. But the fact here is this fundamental thought process, or kind of whatever that we have saw till now, this is how actually the numbers have evolved across civilizations. So it has always been like assigning a symbol to a group of objects and using that symbol to, in a short format actually, to denote saying that this symbol denotes a group of XYZ things. Now with this understanding, if we try to take a look back at the number systems of different civilizations that we quickly flipped through a few minutes ago, you see how the different symbols are assigned to different logical groups of numbers. So this is the very fundamental stepping stone of the evolution of numbers. And this is how numbers have evolved across the world. Now there could be different kinds of notations, the groupings can be different, but the underlying theme is the same across civilizations. That's my point. So that is how the symbols are used to represent numbers. But the numbers are unlimited. So what about the symbols? That's where the concept of base comes in. So what is a base? As you know, there are 26 letters in English alphabet, right? A to Z. Now, using just these 26 letters, the whole English language has evolved. Same is the case for any language, of course. But the fact here is we have a limited set of symbols. Yes, of course, A to Z, they are symbols. It's just that we have attributed a sense of phonetic notation to it, the way we pronounce, the way we use, all these are attributed to that structure which is written as A or B or C. So end of the day, all are symbols. Okay. So just like how we are reusing this 26 letters to construct words, sentences, paragraphs, and everything in the English language, same way in mathematics as well, there is a concept of base. Now base in very simple words is a set of unique symbols, which are numbers, of course. So just to make it simple, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 0. So all these 10 are symbols, for instance, for the moment. Okay, so these symbols or the numericals are used to write any number under the sun and above as well. Now, this is our notation today, which is the decimal system. But the ancient people back then in different civilizations, they had their different bases. And here is a quick look of all those bases. Now, Egyptians used base 10, Sumerians base 60, Mayans 20, ancient Chinese base 10, and of course India as well base 10. It's a decimal system. And if we see the number system today, we have base 10, that's generally what we use conventionally. And also we have binary base 2, octal 8, hexadecimal 16. So basically a base can be anything. It's not a hard and fast rule. Like we can just invent a base 7, base 8, base 9. It can be any whole number. In that recent example of sun, moon and star base notations that we just saw, it's of base 3. So I have 3 symbols to play with to create any number. So end of the day, a base boils down to only 2 things. Number 1, convenience. Number 2, efficiency. So we'll stop it at that. Otherwise we have to get into more technicalities, so we'll limit ourselves. So base is again I repeat, it's a simple set of unique symbols which we call as numericals for a specific number system. So that's what a base is. Why we are talking about base? Because base has been a very crucial component in evolution of the number systems across the world. Now, all in all, if we try to summarize the common patterns and the common concerns in different numerical systems, this is what it boils down to. First, coming to the global patterns in counting, the first one is almost every civilization in their counting mechanism, they incorporated a set of symbols to reflect the numbers. And the second one is linear progression of numerals. What it means is they need to add these symbols together or subtract. Think of Roman numerals and you will understand what I mean by the linear progression of numerals. So you need to perform an arithmetic operation implicitly whenever you try to read a Roman numeral. You try to read a numeral. Okay, so these are the 2 main patterns across different number systems. Now, if we see the global concerns in counting, the numbers are unlimited, but the symbols are limited. So every civilization had a limited set of symbols. That's the base, what we just saw, right? Most of the counting mechanisms have been linear in nature, and with this basis, there have been a lot of problems and the notations became very cumbersome. And third and very important concern is lack of fluidity in arithmetic operations. Just think about this. Can you multiply or divide 2 Roman numerals? How it would be? That is exactly the problem with many other numerical systems. Addition and subtraction is fine, but beyond that, the arithmetic operations were not at all fluid in different number systems. So these are broadly the concerns and the patterns in many number systems that we have flipped through at a very high level till now. Now that completes the chapter 1. The history of counting around the world in brief. Now let's move on to the second chapter, history of numbers in Bhaarat. Now the history of the evolution of numerals in various ancient civilizations. It is never so very clear as to what drove them to choose that specific base, or why the symbols are designed the way they are, or what are the authentic scriptures that explain these mathematical details about these civilizations. Same is the case with Bharat. The details are almost lost in time, many of them, but not all. We definitely have a good record, a continuous record of how the numbers have evolved over a period of time. And in this chapter, let's try and understand that. Before we get started, one very important point. Think about it. We only deal with the numbers that are relevant to us in our daily lives in one way or the other. We or the people in the ancient world, everybody, all the humans, we care about the numbers that are relevant to us in one way or the other, be it in our daily lives or as part of commerce or artwork or academics or research. So some way or the other, the number has to be relevant to some sphere of the public. Otherwise, we will never talk about those numbers. This is a very simple, commonsensical point. Hold this in your mind, and we're going to use this back as we progress. So to understand where this concept of numbers or enumeration or counting has originated in Bharat, we have to rely on the most authentic resources that we have, which are the Vedas. And here is one of the oldest written references in the evolution of the numbers. Sri Rudram, as part of Yajur Vedam, which is a set of Vedic hymns praising Bhagavan Shiva. In the 11th canton, this is a very interesting verse. It says that Eka chame, trischame, panchaschame, saptaschame, and it goes on. So basically the translation is as follows. Praying to Rudra to bless us with the numbers 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 15, 17, 19, 21, 23, 25, 27, 29, 31, 33 and the numbers 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, 32, 36, 40, 44, 48 for prosperity and happiness. This is probably the oldest written record about the odd and even numbers ever found in the Vedas. It is part of Sri Rudram, which is very well used today, and this verse is very cryptic in nature. I mean, generally people ask for good food or health or money or prosperity or something, but here this verse purely asks for numbers, and that too in a separated way. It's basically you are praying for God to bless with odd numbers and even numbers. Now people give a lot of interpretations to these verse. Honestly, I did not find anything to be convincing, but end of the day, the literal sense of this part of Chamakam as part of Sri Rudram in Yajur Vedam is all about the odd and even numbers, very clearly written in Sanskritam. Now this is one of the earliest references of numbers in Bhaarat. And also to add to it, the qualification of odd numbers and even numbers, as per modern day history, it says that it attributes to Pythagoras, but this clearly the verse which is from the Yajur Vedam, which dates back thousands of years back, even before Pythagoras. We have this clear documentation of the odd and even numbers. And even till today, you just walk into any Shivalayam and you can get to hear the Namakam and Chamakam, which are being recited by the Pandits over there. And this is the first and very classic example about how the stories about India were not known to the world. Another very ancient reference about the usage of numbers in Bhaarat. This is again from Yajur Vedam as part of the Agni Puja. Here the verse reads as Dashacha Dashacha, Shatamcha Shatamcha, Sahastramcha Sahastramcha, and it goes on. So basically the translation is all about praying to Agni Dev and saying that these bricks which are around the Homakundam or the fire altar, may they get multiplied in terms of tens and 10 tens and hundreds and 10 hundreds and thousands and so on, it goes till billion. So this is the oldest written record about the usage of the ascending powers of 10 in the decimal system, what we are using today. So this again proves the point that the powers of 10, the ascending powers of 10 were mentioned straight out of the Yajur Vedam itself. And also look at the highest numbers here. It talks about a billion and a lot more. So until and unless these numbers have been in the public sphere for some way or the other in terms of usage, they must be definitely relevant. Otherwise, why would they really quote these such huge numbers? It is absolutely doesn't make any sense to quote a number unless it is relevant to us in one way or the other, right? So anyways, coming back, this verse again is the oldest written record about the ascending powers of 10. And the third reference is from Sri Ramayanam. So as part of Yuddha Kanda, Valmiki Maharshi narrates a complete number system which is so huge, talking about multiples of powers of 10. As you can see here, the translation of it is, it goes from 1 Koti to 1 Shanku and Mahashanku, Vrinda, Mahavrinda, Padma, and it all the way goes on to Mahaogha, talking about astronomically high numbers. So if we multiply, these would be like 10 to the power of 20, 25, 30 and so on and so forth. And these numbers, observe one thing, there is a definitive name given to each of these numbers. Now in one form or the others, these numbers have been used in Sri Ramayanam or in the days or the time period of Sri Ramayanam. These numbers have definitely been used. Why, what, how, we don't know that, but a clear number system is articulated in Yuddha Kandam in Sri Ramayanam, and the references are here. Up next is Mahabharatam, and as part of Mahabharatam as well, in quantification of the armies, astronomically high numbers were detailed out as to how to calculate the size of the army and all that. And here are the numbers as per Kurukshetra as to how many from Pandavas and Kauravas fought together in the Kurukshetra army. A clear, not a number system, but a quantification is given in Mahabharatam, thus showing us the fact that how the numbers were written and calculated back then, basically the counting. Up next, we have another reference of usage of an incredibly powerful subject in counting or in dealing with the numbers, that is combinatorics or permutations and combinations. This is one of the oldest references about the usage of permutations and combinations from Sushrutha Samhitha, which is one of the world's oldest written records about the Ayurveda or the medicine. And here there are 6 different tastes: sweet, sour, salty, pungent, bitter, astringent. So these 6 tastes, when they mix among themselves, we have 63 different combinations or 63 unique combinations. Like say for instance, you combine sweet plus sour plus salty, sweet plus sour plus salty plus pungent, and just kind of combine all these 6, and then you have 63 unique combinations, 2 to the power of 6 minus 1. And that's what the highlighted part of the Sanskritam slokam says, that right. Trisastya rasabedhanam. Trisastya means 63 varieties of combinations are possible with these 6 tastes. So enumeration or this concept of permutations and combinations is having a reference in Sushrutha Samhita, but it is incredibly detailed out in another Shastra which is called as Chanda Shastra. I already did a detailed documentary on that about the Pascal's triangle, which is actually called as Meru Prastara and all that stuff. So basically why I'm talking about all these stories is one simple thing. It's to explain the maturity and the advanced usage of mathematics in the ancient scriptures. These are prehistoric scriptures, what we're talking about. Sri Ramayanam and Mahabharatam, they are like, no concrete date has been attributed till now to these ancient scriptures. How old were they? When did they happen and back in time? It is virtually impossible to date. Of course, many scholars are working on it. But coming to Vedas again. So my point here is the usage of numbers and mathematics in India has been so very rich, well ahead of their time. So how did such strong mathematical expertise got developed in Bhaarat? And let's again not lose to the fact that we are talking only in the context of numbers, the evolution of numbers, or it is called as Ganita in Sanskritam. So where did this Ganita originate from? Where it sits, basically, that's what we're going to see now. As you know, there are 4 Vedas: Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Samaveda and Atharvana Veda, and each of these Vedas have 4 internal blocks called as Aranyaka, Brahmana, Samhita and Upanishad. So that's the whole framework of the Vedas. And then we have 6 Vedangas, which are the external blocks supporting these Vedas. And they are Siksha, Vyakarana, Chandas, Nirukta, Jyotishya and Kalpa. And on top of these 6 Vedangas, we have 4 Upavedas, which ascribes to Rig Vedam, Samavedam, Yajur Vedam and Atharvana Vedam again, which are Ayurvedam, Gandharva Vedam, Dhanurvedam and Ardhashastra respectively. So now this is the complete landscape of the Vedic education system. Now where this mathematics comes from is right here. Jyotishya Shastra, the study of astronomy. Now this is the mother source of all the ancient Indian mathematics. Now, if at all there is any branch of knowledge that is incredibly powerful yet highly misused and misunderstood, then it is undoubtedly the Jyotishya Shastra. Forget about the future prediction business and all the commercialization and all nonsense that goes in around Jyotishya Shastra. I'm least interested, and that's absolute nonsense, whatever the future prediction business is there. But once you take a critical look at Jyotishya Shastra, there are incredibly powerful contributions that came in from this field. And here is a quick look about it. And it's also very important to understand the background of Jyotishya Shastra to eventually correlate and understand the evolution of the numbers, which is the very foundation of it. And here is a clear-cut critical view about Jyotishya Shastra. See, first of all, the entire concept of Jyotishya Shastra, the name itself, Jyotishya, means study of light, okay? And it is all about computing the planetary positions and taking into cognizance about how the human lives will be impacted with respect to these planetary positions and all. It is a Shastra in its own right. And as part of computing these planetary positions, 3 main things have been of great importance. Number 1, time computation. Number 2, rate of change of planetary positions. And number 3, size and velocity of the planets. These 3 things gave rise to 3 incredibly powerful fields of mathematics: calculus, trigonometry and geometry. All 3 of them, calculus, trigonometry and geometry, have their origins as part of Jyotishya Shastra. Not many people are aware of it, but India has been practicing these three fields of mathematics as part of Jyotishya Shastra since thousands and thousands of years, and there are incredible references for it. So anyways, let's stay focused on the numbers and numbers and numbers again. At the same time, it's equally important to get a little more context on the same topic, and we'll quickly surf through it. So that's Earth, surrounded by the Navagraha, or the 9 planets, 2 shadow paths or ascending nodes of Moon, and then we have Moon, Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter and Saturn. So that's the Navagraha what we have, and the orbits in which all these 9 planets revolve around the Earth. Remember, I'm talking from a relative position standpoint. And then outside the solar system, there is a strip of constellations surrounding this entire solar system. Now, as all these 9 planets continuously revolve around Earth, the only way that we could get hang of the planetary position is to measure it in reference with the backdrop of the constellation. So basically, when you are looking at a planet, what is the backdrop of that planet? It is in a backdrop of a specific constellation. So that's how we measure basically. So that's the whole essence of Jyotishya. Say for instance, take sunrise for example. During sunrise, the backdrop of sun will always be one specific constellation of the 12. So that is the reason we have 12 months. Okay. So the reason I'm pulling this out is eventually the time computation. There is a detailed classification of time computation as part of Jyotishya, right from thousands of years up until milliseconds. So such a detailed time computation has been part of Jyotishya Shastra. So now what I'm trying to say here is, take an example of a dictionary. A dictionary is like the encyclopedia of almost all the words in English, for example. Now, where do you find alphabets? It's everywhere. The 26 alphabets try to comprise the entire dictionary, giving it a meaning. Same way, Jyotishya Shastra is like a dictionary in which the numerals, right from its origins up until the most complex calculations, everything originates from Jyotishya Shastra. Now, if you ask me where exactly a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or a 4 or a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, where are they written? In the corpus of Jyotishya Shastra from where it is originating, it is not described. It is described in certain mathematical texts which came after it, in a much more simplified format for everybody to understand. But Jyotishya Shastra specifically is a very complex compendium of a lot of mathematical concepts. Now, with that as the historical context about the numbers in Bhaarat, now let's try to reflect on the problems with the number systems across the world and how did the Hindu numeral system resolve it, which is the final leg of this chapter. Here is the most simplistic way to understand the Hindu numeral system. Take 5 people for instance, the poorest and in order of increasing wealth up until the richest. So these 5 guys, towards the left is the poorest, and then little more richer, and then richer, and then richer, and finally the richest guy is towards the right. Now imagine that we gave a 2000 rupee note to the poorest person. Now there are 2 values to this 2000 rupee note. Number 1, an absolute value, which means you take this 2000 rupee note to anywhere in the market and whatever that you want to buy, you will get the worth of 2000 rupees worth goods. So that is the absolute value. And there is also a relative value which is very dear to this person because he's a poor guy. This 2000 rupee note matters a lot to him or her, correct? Now if we pass on this 2000 rupee note to the next guy who is little more richer than this poorest person, for him or her, the absolute value does not change, but the dearness towards the 2000 rupees note might decrease because he's already richer. 2000 rupee note might not matter much to him relatively towards the poorest guy. But the absolute value, that means whether a rich guy or a poor guy takes this 2000 rupee note anywhere into the market, the worth of 2000 rupee note is absolute. But as it changes hands and as the wealth increases, people will start caring less and less about this 2000 rupee note. So there are 2 values to it. One is an absolute value which never changes, and number 2, there is a positional value or a local value. Depending on who is holding that note, the dearness towards that note varies. So a poor man cares a lot about the 2000 rupee note, while the richest guy might not care much about the 2000 rupee note, or it's all about the value what we pay to it, right? Now this setting is very important to understand because this idea fundamentally brought in the place value system into existence. Now just like a 2000 rupee note, imagine you have a 5-digit number, okay? So basically 5 places. And take a number 7 for instance. Now 7 as a number has an absolute value, and the positional value, as you see in different scenarios, as it moves higher and higher towards the left, the positional value increases for 7. A 7 in second box is not as powerful as the 7 in the fifth box towards the bottom, right? So this is basically the thought behind the Hindu numeral system. It is called as positional system. Often there has been a very strong misconception that Indians invented 0. No, that is not the right way of articulating things. It is this positional value system is what completely changed the dynamics across the world in terms of how we deal with numbers. Because of 2 reasons: the convenience of usage of numbers and the efficiency of using these just 9 symbols. So basically you're juggling these 9 symbols with this positional value system made this entire setting very powerful to deal with. And on top of it, as a cherry on the cake, then we have the 0 as a placeholder when the position is empty. So these 2 things, the place value system and the concept of 0, have been the strengths of the Hindu numeral system. And this positional value system has been very well detailed out by Aryabhatta as part of Aryabhatiya, and this is the slokam which explains the positional value system. These 2 lines, which elaborates explaining about the powers of 10, increasing powers of 10, explains the positional value system incorporated in a decimal base. So that's what it says, the highlighted box, sthanam dasagunam syat. And this place value system or positional value system was devised since times immemorial. It is not Aryabhatta who devised it either. It has been in usage in Bhaarat since many years. It is just that he documented in Aryabhatiya, which got preserved, and this is the oldest written record or reference about the Indian numeral system. And also do remember that Aryabhatta himself is also a Jyotishya Shastra expert. He's an astronomer, and this slokam is from his astronomical text called as Aryabhatiya. So that is the reason I said Jyotishya Shastra is a corpus, and the books that came after that in last 2000 years or 2500 to 3000 years, they explain about the positional value system, but not in the core corpus of Jyotishya Shastra. And for a simple reason, you only see the building outside, not the foundation, right? It's in the same logic. So all in all, summarizing the crux of the Hindu numeral system. So 2 main strengths: the place value system. So every numeral has 2 values, a constant absolute value and a variable positional value. So that is one core strength of the Hindu numeral system. And the second one is the concept of 0. This is an incredible thought. The concept of nothing has become the foundation to count anything in this universe. Such a powerful thought, well executed in tandem with the place value system, and that's where we have the Hindu numeral system. And if Hindu numeral system did not exist, this is how you might have written 1986 by now, in a series of confusing and cumbersome letters. And that brings us to the end of chapter number 2, the history of numbers in Bharat, and move on to the final chapter number 3, global adoption of the Hindu numbers. So if we stack up all the ancient scriptures which talks about the numbers, only the numbers, not any other concepts, only the numbers and the arithmetics in ancient Indian mathematics. So this is how it is. The prehistoric ancient scriptures, which we cannot really attribute any date, they are Yajur, Vedam, Jyotishya and Chandas. Right from the very starting of Sri Rudram, talking about the even and odd numbers, up until Chandas, which talks about combinatorics and a lot more. So those are the prehistoric scriptures at a high level. When we get to the historic scriptures, where we can really put a date, and here are they. Surya Siddhanta, written between 3000 to 1500 BCE, and then Aryabhatiya. That's what we just saw, the slokam from Aryabhatiya explaining about the positional value system. So that is written in 5th century CE. And then we have Brahmasputa Siddhanta, written around the same time. And then we have Bakshali manuscript. And then we have Ganita Sara Sangraha, written in 9th century. And then we have Siddhanta Shiromani of 12th century, Yukti Bhasha of 16th century. So all these are ancient Indian knowledge sources on numerals and arithmetics. and of course algebra as well. And many of the scriptures, a lot of them have been translated right from China in the east to the West Asians in the west. So there have been a lot of translations and transmissions of the ancient Indian knowledge on numeral systems, and here are a few of them. Severus Sibhogt of Syria in the 7th century, he is the first one to translate the Hindu numeral system into one of his works. And that is the earliest recorded transmission of Hindu numeral system outside India towards the west. And then comes Al-Khwarizmi of Persia in 8th century CE. So he translated the Jyotishya Shastra books like Siddhanta Siromani and Brahmasputa Siddhanta and a lot more into Persian language. And as part of that, the Hindu numerals and the arithmetic principles of Hindu numerals. Al-Khwarizmi played a very crucial part in translating many of the ancient Indian scriptures into Persian and Arabic and rest of all the West Asian languages, and eventually it got transmitted from West Asia towards Europe. And then eventually we have Leonardo Pisano of Italy in the 12th century, who further translated the translations of the West Asian mathematicians into European languages, especially into Latin. And then once Leonardo Pisano carried the Hindu numerals to Europe, eventually with the age of exploration and the European colonization across the world, the Hindu numeral system got adopted between the time periods of 1500s to 1700s, and it has been widely settled around the world, deeply connected with all facets of the society. That's a very quick look about Severus Sibhogt and what he quoted about the Hindu numerals in his book. And moving next. So that's Al-Khwarizmi of Persia. Again, he translated a couple of texts of Jyotishya Shastra and in the name of Kitab al-Hind, which translates to the book of addition and subtraction according to the Hindu calculation. So that's the book that he wrote. And then his book eventually got translated by a couple of other European scholars into Latin under the name of Algoritmi Deo Numero Indorum, which means a book on the calculation with Hindu numerals. So these are the books that got translated and pioneered the transmission of Hindu numerals into West Asia. And then we have the most important book finally from Leonardo Pisano from 12th century. So he learned Indian mathematics on the Hindu numeral system from the merchants in that space of Mediterranean Sea. And then he wrote a book, and luckily his book is intact. What you're seeing is the original manuscript of Leonardo, where he clearly articulated all the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and he called this as Modus Indorum, which means the method of the Indians. So good thing is Al-Khwarizmi and Leonardo Pisano, two main people who helped transmit the Hindu numeral system to West Asia and towards Europe, clearly gave the credit, quoting the Hindu numeral system with its name as Hindu Numerals all over their works, referring to India. Now this book, Liber Abaci, is very significant. Most of the people in India are not aware of this book, but this book transformed the entire Europe just with the Hindu numeral system, the trade, commerce, the way the bookkeeping was being done. So everything got transformed after this book. But before that, there has been a lot of rift, because for 1800 plus years, whole of Europe was using Roman numerals and abacus for calculations. And with the advent of Hindu numerals, it completely brought in a paradigm shift. Calculations were very fluid, very quick and easy. But then at the same time, there was a lot of rift because of a lot of other reasons. You do your reading and you'll get to know. And the poster, what you're seeing towards the right, is a couple of hundreds of years old, which kind of sets a competition between people who use abacus in conjunction with Roman numerals versus people who use Hindu numeral system and the Hindu arithmetics as part of the whatever is described as part of the Liber Abaci book. So it's a really interesting story to read about Liber Abaci. So that's the story about how the Hindu numeral system evolved in Bhaarat and got transmitted and transformed the world for a good reason. Now the story is definitely incomplete if we do not discuss about why the numbers are written the way they are as of today. Now that is going to be a very tough question because a lot of things have evolved over centuries. The scripts have evolved into multiple formats based on the local dialects or the scripts that have been incorporated. So at least I will admit that I did not get a concrete answer as to how we arrived at this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 the way they are written. But what you're seeing on screen is the Devanagari version of the Hindu numerals, the original version. However, there is still one stone that is not turned yet. Yes, that's the Bhakshali manuscript. Bhakshali manuscript is the oldest artifact of the ancient Indian mathematics, found in the northwest India almost 120 years before, back in the 1800s or the late 1800s, around that period. So it has a huge bunch of manuscripts which talks about different levels of mathematical concepts, and it is written in a rare script called as Sharada script attributed to Saraswati Devi. This type of script is native to Bhaarat and its Kashmir region, which has been the homeland for Kashmiri Pandits, and it's been the powerhouse for knowledge and wisdom since thousands of years. Kashmir has its oldest references about being the powerhouse, as old as written by Vasistha Dhanurveda Samhita also mentions about Kashmir being the powerhouse of knowledge. So that is the antiquity of Kashmir. So anyways, coming all the way back, so this Bhakshali manuscript holds incredible amount of mathematical details, and what you're seeing here, the 1, 2, 3, all the numerals as written in Bhakshali manuscript. So this is how numbers were written back then in Sharada script, which is again, end of the day, it's a Sanskrit, but the written script is Sharada script attributed to Saraswati Devi. So what is in Bhakshali manuscript? What are those hidden details as part of Bhakshali manuscript? That we will see another time. Now that is the most comprehensive yet brief history of the Hindu numerals. What started right from Yajur Vedam Sri Rudram explaining about the numbers, it has come a long way, evolving into different levels of fields of mathematics. And from Bharat, the contribution of the Hindu numeral system to the whole world, for a good reason, is always something to celebrate. And I wish this video reaches out to all the students, especially in India, and they understand the true value that Bharat has spread across the world. And as always, thanks for watching.